Okay everybody, in this video I'm going to review the process of resetting a lost password on either a Cisco switch or a Cisco router. Here we're working with a 2621 router, and as you can see, the router has been just started up, and we're going to press enter a couple of times and get ourselves down to the user exec. And here we are. And you can see the router's name has been defined, meaning that there's already a configuration in here. We're going to attempt to access the privilege mode. It comes up and it asks us for a password. We don't know what the password is, so after a couple of attempts it kicks us out. So we now need to bypass this. And the process is actually very simple. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go back and we want to turn the device off. So we go back over to our physical tab and we turn it off. Give it a couple of seconds, then we're going to turn it back on. And as soon as we turn it back on, we're going to want to jump over to the command line interface, or CLI, and we're going to want to press Control C or Control Break in order to break the boot up process. So I'm going to power it on, go to command line, press Control C, and you'll notice that we stop, and we are now at a prompt called ROMMON. This is the read-only memory monitor. It is a simplified operating system that allows us to do some very basic tasks or commands on the device. It does not, however, load up the entire iOS, so a lot of the commands in the iOS are not available to us. Using this ROMMON, what we want to do is we want to change what is called the configuration register. The register is a bunch of switches, 16 of which can be configured by the administrator. And what we're going to do is, currently the configuration register is set to 2102 in hex, and we are going to change it to 2142. To do that, I use a command config and then 2142. Now, by entering this command, what I'm doing is I'm telling the router that the next time it starts, I want it to bypass, oh, that's not right, config 0x2142. There we go, that's better. So what I want this thing to do is, when it restarts, I want it to bypass the processing of the startup config file, which contains all of our passwords and other commands to configure the router or switch. But I want this bypassed so that the passwords do not come into play, so they're disabled, if you will. The next thing that I need to do is I need to reset or restart the router. And to do that, I'm going to use the command simply reset. And that is then going to start the router into a reboot. And here it's rebooting. So the router has now rebooted, and it's now presenting us with a prompt whether or not we wish to go into the initial configuration dialog. And this is a really good sign that it has bypassed the reading of the starting config, because it right now thinks that this device hasn't been configured whatsoever. We're going to respond to this, and we're going to say no, or just N, press enter. Enter one more time, and we're back to the user exec mode. And take a notice here, we changed from router 0 to just router, and this is another sign that it's not reading the startup config file, which had the command hostname router 0. So that has been disabled. Now we're going to go into the privileged mode with our enable command. And if you recall, last time it was asking us for a password which we didn't know. Well, hey, we're into the privileged mode with no password, again because the passwords have not been enabled. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we want to copy the startup config into the running config. So I'm going to say copy start, run. And what this is going to do is it's going to restore all of the commands that we had in our startup config and put it into the running config, but not actually execute the commands. It's just copying them into the running config. This is going to now then allow us to edit the passwords or to view the passwords and simply gain control of this router, while at the same time not losing all of the configuration commands such as interface IP addresses and so on. So we'll press enter and we'll confirm the copy, and the copy occurs. Press enter again, and I'm still in my enable mode. Now I'm going to do a show run at this point, and you'll notice that it's showing our enable password, but again that basically didn't get executed because we bypassed the processing of the startup exec. Also, if you look down a little further, we have the configuration of one of our interfaces, Fast Ethernet 00 to 192.168.1.1, and those settings weren't lost. So I can either just write down, okay, this is what the old password was, but in some cases passwords get encrypted and you will have no choice but to reset them. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to reset the password. So press Control C, get back to my command prompt, and we are going to go into our global configuration. We are then going to change our enable password to our standard. Okay, press enter. Again, you might want to reestablish or re-enter your other passwords, but we're just going to do the enable password right now. Then we're going to change back our configuration register. If you recall, the configuration register, let's see if we can get it to show us this. No. If we do a do show version, and remember we're using the do command because we're in the global configuration. If I had been in the enabled or privileged mode, I could have just said show version. But because we're in global configuration, we have to put a do in front of it. Do show version, and I'm going to press the space bar, and you'll notice right down here that our current configuration register is set to 2142, and we need to set it back to 2102 in order for it to start processing the startup configuration file again. So to do that, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to change our configuration register back to 2102, and we're going to type in, oh, where am I? Oh, config register 0x2102, press enter. Okay, if I do a do show version again, notice that the register is still set to 2142, but will be 2102 after the next reload. So at this point we have to first save our running config into our startup config and then reload this. So I'm going to type in exit, which is going to bring us back to our privileged mode, and there we are. And I'm now going to do a copy. I'm going to copy our running configuration into our startup configuration, so it will save all of our changes to our passwords and so on. Then we're going to go and we're going to do a reload, and it's going to restart, and it is then going to put into place our new password. So we'll do a reload. And here we go. Okay, so we're back to our user exec interface or prompt, and now we're going to go into our privileged enable, and the password we changed it to just the word password in lowercase letters, and voila, we are in. Now if I do a show running, okay, it's going to show me, okay, there's my password setting, and if you recall, the settings on my IP address and so on. So all of our old settings are in there. We've been able to reset our old passwords, the unknown passwords, and we now have full access back to our device. Okay, so that's it for resetting your passwords.